days and leaders again.
All right, welcome everyone. We are on Teacher Goals Live. We are here with Dr. Brad Johnson. We are going to start in just a minute with the show and talk about the book and all of that fun stuff. But while we're waiting just a minute for everyone to join us live, I would like you all to put in the comments where you're from and where you're tuning in from today. And Dr. Johnson, where are you at today? Where you tuning in from?
Yeah, I'm at home around Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta, Georgia.
So the hot, humid South.
Hot, humid South. Yeah, it's been, and I'm in Indianapolis. It's been pretty hot and humid here too, but not quite like Georgia, that's for sure. And I'm also in my son's bedroom. He's a YouTuber, and I had to change my location because of my computer dying. So this is not my room, but we are all good. All right, I'm seeing someone from Indianapolis. I'm seeing Shannon. Nice to see you, Shannon. And we're going to have quite a few more people tuning in, but I just wanted to talk today, and I was just on your podcast, yesterday talking about your new book, Empowering Students, and I was just going to have you tell us a little bit overview, big picture, what this book is about and why it's a game changer when it comes to empowering students and school discipline.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of accumulation of my work over 30 plus years and just things that I've implemented along the way or that I've, utilized throughout that 30 years. And the big thing to me is we've always looked at behavior very differently than we have, for instance, academics. If we have a student that like does really bad in math, we try to help them get better. We don't just say, "Oh, you failed, you're terrible, you're horrible." But with behavior, it seems like we focus on the behavior and what they do wrong and what we need to be the consequence. And not that there shouldn't be accountability, but I think it's an opportunity to help them grow. It's to help them improve their behavior, just like we do academics. And so, in this book, we kind of reframe the whole concept of classroom management. I'm one that's always said that if you feel like you have to be the sheriff, you're going to spend your whole year, looking for the trouble and trying to deal with it. Where instead, if you learn how to develop those relationships with the students and get buy-in from them and help them understand that you care, that you want the best for them, etc. And then on top of that, build high expectations, build routines, build procedures in, because that's part of the learning process too that we sometimes forget. We're so focused on jumping right into the curriculum that really students need to learn how to learn before they even get to the content. And so part of that is, in the book, I talk about that. It's more important with classroom management, not to have so much rules, but to have those procedures in place and those expectations and not procedures, but the whole process in place where that, that you don't have to focus so much on rules. I also talk about the importance of the relationship, and sometimes I get a little pushback on that, even on social media, where people think that I'm just talking about the warm and the fuzzies and trying to get the students to be your friend. And the reality is that that's not, if you think about relationship, part of that, yeah, is caring about someone. But a big part of relationship, even in life, personal or professional, is it's so much more than that. It's about learning how to have respect. It's about learning how to communicate and how to listen, those types of things. Even with relationship, if we're totally honest, it's about being able to have tough conversations. Even in our personal life, if you have a spouse, there's times where you're going to have tough conversations, but that's part of relationship. Relationship takes work. And so that's what I mean when I talk about it. And in the book, I just give, details and ways, strategies to do that, and for students to understand the importance of that, because students don't even really, it's just like everything else when they come to school, whether it's, learning math or whatever, learning how to develop relationships and work through those relationships is something that is important for us to help them learn as well. Because if you think about it, especially in the elementary grades, when they're coming into school, their teacher is going to be the first person really in their life, to a large extent, outside of their family, that's going to be very influential in their life. And then they're going to have to learn how to get along with and to work with and to be with them every day for most of their waking hours in the school year. And so that's why that I put so much emphasis on relationship, because once you get that right, it's just like the quote that I put on the front of the book, relationships before rigor. When you get that part right, and they know that you care about them and you've built that kind of relationship with them, then they're probably going to give you their best. They're going to want to do more for you, and they're going to be encouraged to do more for themselves, which is what we want anyway. Through that, I developed some different concepts and strategies, or I didn't, but I implemented them, such as the Pygmalion effect. Because often in school, what we do, if you think about it, it's called the golem effect. And that's where we expect the worst from students. How many times have we heard a teacher say in fourth grade, ask third grade teacher, who's going to be my troublemakers? And so that's how they see them. That's how they view them. And often tell them, if you are looking at who's going to be your troublemakers or asking who's going to be the troublemakers, they're probably all going to be to an extent, because that's what your expectation is. So with the Pygmalion effect, and it's actually a psychological concept that's been studied in schools. It was long before schools, but Rosenthal was a scientist that studied it in schools, and his first big experiment was in California. And it's very interesting. What he found is that he went to, and his colleagues went to, a very large school in California. And they would take, for instance, I'll give you an example of like second grade. So they would take second graders at the beginning of the year, and they would give them something similar to an IQ test. And after the test was over and they tallied the results, they went to the teachers and they told the teachers, here is your top 20% or 25% of your top performing students. Now, what was interesting is that was not the top 20 or 25% performing students. They randomly selected students that had nothing to do with their test score. So some of them were actually the lowest scoring. Some of them were middle. They were high. They just took a random selection. But they randomly selected that 20 or 25% and said, these are your high scoring students. And they have the most potential to be great. And what happened is, at the end of the year, they retested them, the same, hundreds of students, and they did this in multiple grade levels, but I'm, again, just giving second grade as an example. So at the end of the year, they took these second graders and tested them again, and what they found is that 20 to 25% that they say were the highest performers actually were some of the highest performers at the end of the year. So the only thing that really changed in that school year was that the teachers thought that they were brilliant, that their teachers thought that they were high performers. And so the Pygmalion effect really is that. It's when you as a leader, and this can be a teacher with students, it can be a principal with their teachers, it can be district level with your school level leaders. But what they found is that when you have high expectations for those you're leading, but you think that they are high quality, you're going to be a better leader. So as a teacher, think about it. If you think you're teaching a brilliant child, you're going to work a little harder. You're going to teach a little better. The other thing with that too, not only are you going to raise your game, but you're probably going to have a little bit more flexibility with them. You may not be as hard on them, or you may, kind of work around the edges with them because or you think that they're brilliant. And so you may not be as quick to discipline and things like that, or you may want to talk things out instead of just going right to punishment. So it's a whole mindset shift that we see in the leaders in this, what we call Pygmalion effect. And the term actually comes, and I don't want to go too much into it, but people might have heard of Pygmalion. They might have heard of My Fair Lady. And it's where that this professor took this street girl, she was a flower girl, and he made her his goal was to fool the elites of society that they would think she was. And he did. And that's kind of the thing. It's what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so what happened in that second grade class with those teachers is that 25% of students that they thought were geniuses, that's how they taught them. That's how they treated them. That's how they interacted with them. So guess what those students began to do? They begin to think, well, maybe I am smart. I'm being treated that way. I'm being taught that way. And so that self-fulfilling prophecy means that at the end, they come to believe that and become that. And so it's a very powerful psychological effect that we can have on our students. And I learned this a long time ago in college. And so I took this early on into my teaching. And so when I had my classes, when they come in, I would say things instead of who's the troublemakers. I would be like, I've heard nothing but great things about you from your teachers from last year. I'm expecting to have a great year. I heard y'all are all just high performers. And it set that tone for the school year. And it really did, change a lot of them, how they functioned in the class, how they performed in the class, how they interacted in the class, all because of that little difference in how that we approach them. What's also interesting with the Pygmalion effect is think about this for a minute. So the only thing that changed that school year was that their teachers thought they were brilliant. What didn't change that school year was their home life, their socioeconomic status, their ethnicity. None of that changed, which obviously, probably can't change. But my point is, none of that mattered. What mattered is that those teachers thought they were high-performing students, and they became high-performing students. And that's a tremendous mind shift. When we talk about a growth mindset, that is a growth mindset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thinking about, experiences with students is a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. And we all know and have done the research behind John Hattie, and we know that collective self-efficacy, just believing that your students can learn, has one of the biggest impact on learning. So it's very, fascinating that a lot of student success is due to the adults in the building think they can do it and believe in them, which is big.
Oh, absolutely. And that with student, that's where we want to start. But this even is in, the adult world. There's been military that has utilized this Pygmalion effect with the same results. So, it is powerful. The expectations of adults, and not just the expectations, but again, those adults with those expectations because of what they thought the students were, taught them that way too. They raised their game. Which is an important part of that. And then I move on to other things. One of the big ones is reframing behavior. And I really like the example I give because when you think about it, one of the big things I talk about with teachers is that the teaching profession is high agreeable. That's a personality trait that we have. And what that means is that when a teacher is high in agreeableness, that means that they're kind, they're empathetic, they're caring, which are great traits to have, and we want teachers to have those traits. But when you have those traits, there are challenges that come with it. And some of those challenges are like not being able to say no, not being able to set boundaries. But a big one is that conflict. They are afraid of conflict, and that's one of the reasons that teachers struggle with classroom management. And so when we talk about reframing behaviors, if a student is argumentative, we just see that as bad. And so we take steps to stop that. Now, there's a difference between them, being argumentative and being disrespectful. Again, that goes back to, like I said, there's some accountability and responsibility, but being argumentative and being disrespectful aren't necessarily the same thing. And so we want to deal with that, but we don't want to, if a student's argumentative, we, again, first tend to think of that as negative. But in reality, that may not be a bad thing. And again, that's part of personality, too, because about 15% of the population, or when you think about a class of 20 children, about 2 to 3 of them are probably going to be what we call low in agreeableness. Low in agreeableness means that you, just by your nature and your personality, are going to be more disagreeable. You're going to be more argumentative. You're going to, be less likely to get along with other people. You're probably going to buck authority to a certain extent. Now, again, like I said, there's a line you can cross, but just having those personality traits is not necessarily bad. And when I go back to the arguing, my point is this. Imagine if you're in a courtroom, as a teacher, as an educator, or as a principal, you're in a courtroom. Do you want your lawyer to be good at arguing? And of course you do. So it's not that it's a negative thing, it's just how we look at it and how we train the students with it. So that student that's argumentative, we're like, okay, I see your point, try to listen to you. We do help them learn how to do it properly, but that can be a very important trait for them going forward. And so all that took was the ability to reframe it and to look at it from a different perspective. And that's with anything. The student that's highly competitive, find ways to let them exert that or exhibit that. If they like to work alone, maybe they don't like to work in groups. Yeah, it's important for us to help them learn how to collaborate, but sometimes we may just need to let them work alone so that they are able to do that. It's kind of like the kids, because I talk about the importance of physical activity, recess, unstructured play too. It's kind of like the child that's hyperactive. If they can't sit still in class, the first thing we do is to take away recess. Well, that's the worst thing we can do. They need recess more than anything else. It's learning logical consequences to things and learning that some things aren't necessarily a bad behavior. It's just a behavior that they are exhibiting badly. And I think that's a huge difference in that we have to realize, and that will help students when they can learn how to control those behaviors and use them more positively. Then we have really reframed and changed the whole concept of classroom management. All right, hopefully I'm still going. I think you might have frozen. But anyway, so beyond that, one of the big ones to me that I really focus on is called educare. In education, one of the root words is actually educare, and it's EDUCERE. And so when you think about education from that definition actually means to bring, to draw, or lead out. And so what are we leading or bringing out of our students? Well, we're drawing out their talents and their abilities and their strengths. See, in education, we focus on weaknesses most of the time. If a student does great in science and poor in math, we focus on the math. And we focus on their weaknesses so much that by the time they come to school, they dread it. And I like to give the example to teachers. Think about if as teachers, we come to school and we're going to require all a mile in a certain amount of time. And if you can't, then instead of it being, okay, we're going to make you run even more and even more, till you get there, you're probably not going to like that. In fact, I always say that I would be the one that starts running and just runs home and quits, because that's how I would view that. But we have students that come to school every day that are that way. We focus on what they can't do. We focus on what they can't do. And we take away some of the things they enjoy. We take away arts, we take away music, we take away PE, so that we can just keep focusing on what they don't do well. And then we wonder why students hate school and when they come defeated and deflated. But when you think about educare and you think about focusing on their strengths and their abilities and their talents, then we find a place where they can get excited about learning. It's a place where they can actually be successful with learning. Because think about how many students we have that come to school day after day that never experience success. And so they leave defeated and they hate school. And I can understand why. But when we begin to focus on their talents and their strengths, which again goes back to the relationship piece, how do you know what some of their strengths are, what some of their talents are, if you don't have a relationship with them? And so when you do that and you can begin to implement things into the lessons or allow them to do projects in a certain way that illustrates or is able to show their talents and their strengths, then they begin to feel success. And once we experience success, that's what builds confidence. And so when they build that confidence, then they are willing to try more things or new things. Or if they do fail at that point, it's not as devastating because they have experienced success before and have that confidence. And again, that is a growth mindset that is the very opposite of what we do pretty much in education, but that really allows the students to be successful, that empowers them and gives them that confidence that is so important to be successful. And I think you might have frozen again. So anyway, so those are some of the points, the reframing, like I said, the educator. So just all of these, and they build on top of each other. And if you think about how that and how easy it is to implement these, this doesn't mean you have a new curriculum. It doesn't mean you take away from anything that's going on. It's just basically how you kind of shift that mindset from managing the child to helping the child develop to the point that they are empowered, with that confidence, with that success, because you believe in them, because they are utilizing their talents and their strengths, that you don't even really have to deal with the issue of classroom management as much.
Absolutely. And we are getting comments from people all around the world. Just letting you know, we have somebody from South Africa, Philippines, Mississippi Delta, Texas, St. Louis, and lots of other countries out there right now. So pretty intriguing that some of these things you're talking about are not just issues in the U.S. Are unique to the United States, but all around the world, students, in all cultures, really, and I'm saying Canada right now. And, when we talk about empowering students, it's just something universally where in schools, going back to the factory model where the only thing we were trying to output was students that could go and work in the factories. They were quiet. They did what they were told. They were told to follow directions and then to go out and, be amicable and do what the supervisors said. So, thinking about nowadays, and somebody from Germany, it's again quite amazing that teachers all around the world are seeing similar issues with student behavior. And a lot of the pushback is that some students are meant, like you said, to be a lawyer. Some students are meant to be CEOs. Some students are meant for big things. And we take their personality they have that could be used as an asset, such as, they could be a YouTube personality, they could be on TV, they could be, again, running a company, they could be a leader. And what we do with a lot of these students is we just beat it out of them, not literally, but with how we talk to them, with sit down, be quiet, listen to me. So when you think about empowering students, if you were to say, for example, you have a student in class that is a little bit of a personality, and it would be easier if everyone just sat there and did what they were told. But that one kid is in the office, that one kid gets a referral, that one kid is sitting out at recess. I just think of so many students that were just taught, or the personality was kind of stripped of them in a way, because they have learned that the way to get ahead in school is to just sit down, be quiet, and sit there. And so I'm kind of curious, when we're thinking about empowering them, because a lot of teachers are afraid to lose control. That's a big thing that I see, is like, I don't know if I can do that because I have all these standards to teach. I have these tests they need to take. Like, is it my job to empower students to do things beyond the test?
Yeah, and so you can do that and still have the test. One of the best ways, and one of the ways I taught life science, is I would give them flexibility in how they would do projects. And because of that, they could bring in their strengths, their passion, and kind of show off, so to speak. Some would get up and teach a class. Some would make movies. They just were really unlimited in how that they could do the projects, but it gave them the opportunity to do it a way that they liked, a way that they were comfortable with. and a way to showcase their talent. And it was pretty amazing. Actually, some would get up and do like commercials that I'd never even thought of. And I was like, but it was just, you could see their passion in it and just light up with it. And, that is a big difference. You talked about the difference today. And unfortunately, our leadership is similar to that. It's similar to the old assembly line, get them on task and make sure they're doing their work. And if not, we need to punish them. So it's not just in the classroom, but it actually reverberates pretty much through education and just about every field to an extent, unfortunately, because we really do live in a different time. There really is no assembly anyone to go work at now. It's automated. But I like the point you made about YouTubers, for example, because when I think about divergent learning, which I talk about in the book as well, think about the YouTuber, the ones with the big personalities. They probably got in trouble a lot in school. And so, like you said, they were trying to correct that, and that wasn't really something to be corrected. It's just how you engage with it or handle it, how they exhibit it, that can have consequences. But just being that way is not necessarily a bad thing, because when I talk about like divergent learning in the book, when you think about it, school is convergent. And convergent means there's only one right solution to every problem. So 1 + 1 = 2, 1 + 1 always equals 2, and 1 + 1 only equals 2. And that's how we teach. The problem with that is that that's not real world. Nothing in the world really is that simple. Ask anybody that's married, there's never just one solution, unless she's always right. And that, is the smart thing. But the reality is most things in life don't have just one solution. There's multiple solutions, and you try to find the one that probably works the best. And with that divergent, the example I give in the book, which is so interesting, is NASA in the 60s and 70s. They were looking for who in their engineers and scientists were the most creative. And so these researchers, Jarman and Land, they created something like a creativity test, and they gave it to the engineers and the scientists at NASA. And the results were pretty unique, but just like with good research, they had another group that they would do, and so to get like a baseline, so they did just a regular group of people. But the differences were so extreme to them that they decided to do even more research. So they decided to actually go and they took 1,600 5-year-old students and they gave them this same creativity test. And the results they found there were so different than the others, again, that they decided to follow these students longitudinally, which we know is the best type of research. So they actually followed them from the age of 5 until they graduated from high school. Now, what they found with that 1,600 4 and 5-year-old students, when they gave them this creativity test, is that 98% of them scored as if they were a high functioning genius in creativity. At a genius level is what they basically were functioning at, 98% of them. Now, they did it 5 years later, around 4th or 5th grade. By then, the number dropped to 30%. And then in 5 years, around 10th grade or so, they did it again, and it dropped to about, I think it was 10%. I can't remember exactly. You'd have to read the book. And then by 18 to 20 years old, that same group of 1,600 children that had scored at 98% genius level for creativity at 5 years old, by the time they were ending high school, only 2% of them scored at what would be a genius level. So they went from 98% to only 2% in that span. And I always like to ask, what happened during those years? And it was school. And we make them creatively dumber with school, unfortunately. And so that's why we see, if you ever listen to artists comedians like a Jim Carrey or somebody, whether you like him or not, it doesn't matter. But if you talk to those type of people, they absolutely hated school, absolutely hated it, because they were divergent thinkers. They are creative people, and school doesn't have a place for that. And the place that really does allow it, the arts, music, things like that, are the things we usually take away first. And so, they really don't have an outlet for that. And so we really do. And in the book, I talk about ways that, you can actually include it even in math class. One of the examples I think I used in the book, I can't remember. I had a friend that taught advanced math. And what he would do is have his students actually take a budget, and they had to plan out a vacation for the summer. And they, had the money. He gave them a certain amount of money to use. And what's interesting, think about this. We always think 1 + 1 = 2. Do you think those different groups had the same vacation plan? Absolutely not. Everyone was different, with different places, different focus, different, activities. So again, it shows that there is no one correct answer. What I love that he did, and it kind of showed his own creativity, is he would pick the one that he liked the best, and that would be the vacation that he would take during the summer. And so I was like, that's actually a pretty good idea. So he had his vacation planned out for him by his students. But it just again shows that creativity is so important. And what's interesting is, we always, especially here in the U.S., but other countries, think we're creative and we're innovative. But yet that's the one thing we don't allow children to improve upon in school, because that's the one thing we kind of take away. We don't have time for that. That's not something that's easily measured on a standardized test, which we know that I don't like those anyway. But yeah, it is. It's, those kids, the YouTubers, entrepreneurs, the research says that Generation Z and Generation Alpha that's on the way, most of them don't even really go to college. And yet that's really all we're really focused on, is for students to go to college. But they want to be entrepreneurs. And so we need to shift a lot of what we do to help them where that they will be successful in life.
Absolutely. And we have a special guest in the studio, Caroline. I thought we'd bring her out because I think you had said that you had some people who have already read your book. Is that correct?
Yeah, they've reviewed it.
Bring her out and have a little chat.
Yeah, bring her in.
Hold on 1 second. All right.
Hi.
Hey, Caroline, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
How are you? Thanks for waiting backstage. Welcome to Teacher Goals Live.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you do? And I heard that you had already seen the book or had some experience with the book, and your impressions of it. And what do you do? Where are you from?
I am from North Georgia. I teach kindergarten. I'm a veteran teacher, 28 years. So that's the lens through I read the book, through the lens of a veteran teacher. I also have block students from our local university. So I was thinking of them as I read it. And I was thinking of my daughter, who is going to be a teacher as well. So she starts school next month for her education classes. So when I read the book, that's what was on my mind. How can I use it to help me, to help the block students that I have? Thinking of the block students, this book offers so many strategies, 10 chapters. Each chapter lays out your strategies, what you can do to be a more assertive teacher is what we start with in the book. And it goes from there. So how can I use that to help myself and the girls that I work with from our local college? So I think I highlighted something from every chapter. There's something in the book, no matter what grade you teach. As I said, I teach kindergarten. So I see things that I do, which validates whenever Dr. Johnson wrote some things in there. I'm like, oh, I do that. And there's things I haven't tried that I want to try. So it does validate some things that I use in my class. But I can see this book being beneficial to pre-service teachers as well, those teachers that are just starting out, as well as veteran teachers. The first chapter was how transforming your yourself to be more assertive. So that's something that Dr. Johnson said that sometimes we lack. We agree to everything I do. So just reading through the book, there's real world examples. There's strategies used, there's stories there's used, how you can relate it to yourself, how you see others use it. Just highly recommended book. I thoroughly enjoy reading it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And the funny thing is, you talk about being more assertive. I work a lot with schools and work in schools. And there was a meeting that I was a part of today. And 9 out of the 10 teachers were on board with something. Like, they were on board with how we were going to do things. 9 out of 10. This one teacher says, and somebody asked her, I really want to know what you think. And she was hesitant to say it. She goes, I don't know if you all are all going to agree with me, but here's what I think. We had spent a half hour talking about why we all agreed about a decision. And she basically said the opposite of what we had said. And we all just stood there, thought about it for a second. And we ended up going with the idea that that teacher had suggested, because she chose to be brave enough to stand up and, not just sit there and we teach people to be agreeable, as we all are in education, right? Like, if everyone is wanting to go this way, I might feel differently about it, but I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to look like I'm a difficult person or a difficult educator. And we do it with kids too, right? If mostly everyone's on board, let's just go with it. But the reality is that one person might have, it's not about the crowd, it's about the best idea. And in good cultures and in good organizations and in good classrooms, best ideas win. It's not necessarily always the majority or always the simplest idea, but best ideas win. So thinking about that with assertiveness, we get the assertiveness out of the kids, don't we? Like, we don't want the kids to be assertive. We want the kids to just, again, sit there, be quiet, and go with the flow in a way. But when students sometimes argue with you, they might not do it in the most respectful way. They might not know how to have a good conversation with you about not agreeing. But the reality is that, if we teach them to just always agree with everything that we say and always agree with everything their classmates say, are we creating adults that can go out in the workplace and do what that teacher did today, and actually stand up for herself and what she believed on? And we might not have gone with it. We might have, but at least she had a fighting chance, in that conversation, and it ended up being the best idea. So in the classroom, what does this look like? How do we teach not only our educators, right? Not always what's popular.
Yeah, absolutely. And the assertiveness, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that really is the place you start. It's hard to do anything else if you're not assertive and, are willing to do it, to give it a try. Like we said, it's so easy to, talk yourself out of it, I guess. But especially when it comes to classroom management, I think that's one of the reasons that so many, especially new teachers, struggle. And that's one of the main reasons that they do leave the field. And it often is that lack of assertiveness, because not only, the research is pretty clear, teaching is probably the #1 profession for what's called agreeableness, that kind, caring, which you want from teachers. We don't want teachers in there beating the kids and cussing them out and throwing them out the windows. We want them to be kind and caring and empathetic, but there are always challenges to that. Like I said, setting boundaries, being able to deal with conflict. And so that, again, that goes right hand in hand with, some of the issue with conflict. So, but I like what Caroline said too, that she, a lot of it she could see that she does in the classroom. And I think good books do that. I think they write towards the people that do the things right. And then it helps some that maybe are new or maybe need new strategies to help them, find ways to implement. But I think it really should for good teachers, a lot of it kind of reaffirms what they're doing anyway. And that's why they're good teachers.
Absolutely.
No, and I agree with that. Just as I said, being a veteran teacher, I've tried some of these strategies. I've had all these strategies over the years, and when Dr. Johnson did write them, it validates what I do. But it also, there were strategies that I had never thought of. When I see those and be in kindergarten, some things may not work for 5-year-olds. So that's what this brain is for 5-year-olds. Then you differentiate and you have all of the strategies and the ideas that he gave in this book that you can implement in any grade. It doesn't matter what grade you're in, it will work and help motivate your class.
All right. And, I want to thank you for coming on and telling us about the book. Hopefully we hear more from you soon about it and see you implement the practices. We do have another guest we're going to bring on in just a second, but do you have any closing remarks about the importance or the why? Is there anything else you want to add that wasn't talked about?
Teaching it's has been my life for 28 years. My wife, the kids, and seeing them learn, even the 5-year-olds, and talking about how they learn through play. Let them. It's just, it doesn't have to be like in a chair all the time. I don't like to use the chairs. Let them explore. Let them learn. That's how they play. In this book, there's a chapter about that. And again, it validates what I do with play every day, because that's a non-negotiable for me in my class. So thoroughly enjoyed the book, and just proud that I got to read it and share.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And you have a good rest of your night, and we're going to welcome on.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline.
All right, thank you, Caroline. All right, we have another guest in the studio, Dr. Rachel, and she's gonna come on and tell us about what she does and where she's from and all of that. But just the fact that I love the fact that you brought on someone teaching right now, and in a kindergarten, because that's a rough age. In a kindergarten, we really see some wild behaviors, because some of them had never been in daycare or preschool. The norms are not normal. Right. So when you're in the kindergarten classroom, you're in for quite a shock, sometimes with the behaviors that you see, but immediately procedures and routines are great, and we got to do them. But to the point that, when we're looking at who they are as a person and, honing in on their behaviors. So it's just a fine line, I guess, with kindergarten, especially, when they're in 5th grade, it's a little bit easier, to work with this. So I thought that was very interesting that even a kindergarten teacher who sees some of the craziest things, because I've seen kindergartens before, and I couldn't do it myself. I'm gonna throw that out there. I taught elementary, I taught middle school. Hats off to you early elementary teachers, because that's a whole other animal, that's for sure. All right, Dr. Rachel, we're gonna bring you up on stage. Can you hear us? I think you're on mute.
Hold on. On mute. I appreciate that.
Oh, welcome to the show.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. We just want to know a little bit about who you are, where you're from.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me okay, because my internet is a little tricky tonight. But my name's Rachel Edewekit. I'm a school principal, elementary school principal from the state of Maryland. And I'm also a former kindergarten teacher, so I love listening to the previous guests. Kindergarten is such an amazing time. I had a best time teaching there, almost a decade in that grade.
Now, I taught middle school, which is tough, and that's why I have some gray hair going on both sides. But I don't know how. I say middle school ages you about in dog years, right? Every year in middle school teaching is about 7 years, but I would say early elementary might do the same thing, if not bigger. But
I think you have to have a heart for both of every age group where an educator is. They have to have a heart for it. Some people are great with the middle grades. You have to have a heart for that. Some people are really good high school, or like me with babies. I love that age group. So that's why we just spread the wealth everywhere. We spread the love.
Absolutely. So you're a school principal, and have you had exposure to this book so far?
Yes. Congratulations, Dr. Johnson, on this great book.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So reading the book and having the experiences you have with the early elementary and being a school principal, what is your thoughts on the book so far? What ideas kind of struck a chord with you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed many ideas. One of them that was very interesting to me was the idea around the teacher assertiveness. I was in the classroom for almost 10 years. And I think I agree with Dr. Johnson and what everyone has already said, that we are very agreeable people as teachers. That's a part of our personality. But there's definitely more things that we can do, or conditions that can be improved by us sharing what our thoughts are And that's what's been cool about being on both sides of, the schoolhouse, being a teacher first, and then like a department leader, and then a assistant principal and the principal. So I've been able to see both sides of that coin, and I understand better what the teachers need because I hear from them more, right? I have the experience of a classroom teacher, but that was a decade ago, and a lot has changed during that time. And as a new principal, I was a new principal during COVID-19. A lot has changed just in the last 5 years or 6 years. So it's been a continual process of improvement. And a lot of that is because we're hearing from our staff and from our teachers what are the things that we need. We're hearing from our students what are things that we could do to enhance their time in school, because we are all managing around chronic absenteeism, disengagement. There's a lot of issues that are challenging to students and to teachers. And so I think this book does a good job of talking about ways that we can elevate our needs and finding ways to meet them.
So when you're thinking about traditional discipline, you've seen a lot of kids in your office, as an assistant principal, you've seen a lot of kids come your way. Is it safe to say that some of the kids that you saw maybe were a little bit misunderstood, or maybe they had a personality that wasn't so, that wasn't agreeable, to everything, and kind of questioned authority a little bit, and maybe perhaps it was threatening to the teacher, in a way, or to learning environment. It might not have been in the nicest way, but the kids that tend to thrive in school tend to be the kids, and the kids that tend to get the most class dojo points, or the most PBIS points, tend to be the ones that just do as they're told. And that's what I found, at least from my experiences. Think about a kid coming to your office. Would you say it's fair that maybe their potential, or maybe the empowerment wasn't quite there? And it's not easy, but what have you seen, coming through your door?
I see all sorts of things. I mean, I can think about myself even as a student. I didn't go to the principal's office on a regular basis, but I was one of those students who talked a lot. I always had something to say. I loved being in school. One of the comments, I mean, teachers don't write this comment anymore, but one of the comments I had as growing up was, Rachel is not the teacher, I'm the teacher. And I have to remind her about that. Like, we would never write that comment anymore, but that was who I was as a student. I wanted to run things. I definitely had a strong point of view. I was great with most teachers. I think that, it's just my personality. It was a function of that. I didn't mean any harm by it, but I was probably more assertive and kind of that leader, even as a young kid. And so I laugh at those comments now that I had, because there are definitely children like that I've taught over the years that are just leaders, and they want what they want. They keep everyone in line. They're very organized. They want, to enforce things, even if it's not in our purview. So I appreciate that personality, because I see a lot of myself in students today who have that. But I also see, when you talked a little bit about the compliance, the students who tend to get their PBIS points, they are more compliant. But if you have one-on-one conversations with students as teachers, and myself as principals, they have a lot of ideas. They have a lot to say. And I think they're just conditioned to not rock the boat. But there's a lot of leadership in our quietest students. And those are the students that I really want to meet, because I'm always intrigued by that. I was never a quiet child. So when I see a quiet student, I'm curious. I want to know more about them and what their ideas are, because kids of all ages have great ideas, whether they're shouting them from the rooftops or they're quiet and introverted. So I think it's just important to lift that up in general. When we're empowering students, it's not just focusing on students who are already feeling strong and confident and giving them a bigger voice. It's also about looking at those introverted students and finding out how we can best meet their needs and not make assumptions on what their thoughts or feelings are.
Absolutely. When you say empowering students, that's interesting, because there's a very, well-known meme that says, it's about the quiet kid. We don't really think about that, because again, they are sometimes complacent. They are sometimes people pleasing. Sometimes the trauma response, with
Yeah.
fawning. Sometimes it's just that they're introverted. But when you think about those kids, and I was a quiet kid as a child, and I never really was, they never really tapped into who I was because I didn't speak out in class, so they left me
Yeah.
alone. The empowerment wasn't really there. I didn't get my voice because I wasn't loud,
Right.
and I was afraid of that. So I like that point of view. Like, what
Yeah.
are the quiet kids thinking, and how do we get that out?
Yeah. How can we pull that? And I know a lot of that is relationship based. In my role as a principal, I always felt like I missed the class, right? I would never say I regret leaving the class because I love what I do as a principal. They're two different roles, but I miss having those 25 kids that I know really well. Well, now I have hundreds more kids, but I am always curious and intrigued. So that helps keep me motivated as a principal. And it's very gratifying for me to approach a child and they're like, oh my gosh, the principal's here. What is she going to say? And when I take a genuine interest in who the student is, who they are, what their interests are, what they like, what they don't like about school, I ask students all the time, tell me what you love about school. How can we do more of that? That's one of my favorite questions to ask. And not only the students, I ask the staff that. I just moved schools about 3 weeks ago, July 1st, and it's my first time moving as an administrator. So having been at my previous school for almost a decade, now moving on to a new place, that's the first question I ask everybody, staff, student, parent, volunteer, community member. What do you love about the school and how can we keep doing that? Because that's what I want to do. I want to continue the great work that's already being done there.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Johnson, you've been quiet for a minute, which is, a little bit, I'm impressed.
Well, I was going to say I can just agree with her because I can understand the low agreeable, the argumentative, and things like that because that was me. And I had to learn assertiveness, and I talk about it in the book, is actually a skill set. When people are highly agreeable, the ones that are quiet and complacent go along, they think of, when they hear the word assertive, they think of it as a negative thing. They think of it as being mean or aggressive. But it's really a skill set that you learn. And for people that are low agreeable, like I was, it teaches you how to be a little bit more empathetic and care about others. So it balances that hard edge. And then on the flip side, with people that are high agreeable, it helps them learn how to speak up. Teachers are great for speaking up for everyone else, but they do a terrible job at speaking up for themselves. And, they'll go to bat for anyone except themselves. And they're so hard on themselves. The just self-critique of teachers. I often tell administrators, you'll never say anything to them that they haven't said to themselves 100 times before you got there, and probably, 10 times meaner, because they are just so tough on themselves. And so that's that part of agreeableness that you want to, kind of help change. Just like when you talked about the 9 teachers in the meeting, they probably had great ideas too, but they didn't want to speak up. They didn't want to challenge. They just wanted to be agreeable. And, a lot of times, and I love that you said that you, talk to those children too and listen to, their ideas and because they have it, but, maybe too shy or just, not willing or want to speak up, don't want the spotlight or whatever. And, but we do them a disservice too, absolutely, by not, tapping into that and drawing from them. Because when I go back to that word educator, I mean, that's for every student. What is their talents? What are their strengths? What are their abilities? Not only what are they, but how do we get them out of them? How do we get them to develop them and maximize them and really reach their full potential?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, we do have in the audience, we've had some comments and some questions. There's a lot of people commenting about the empowerment part. It's really resonating. For example, we got Dustin saying teaching students to advocate for themselves is difficult for those students. And it's also difficult for adults. It's difficult for myself. I've had a hard time with it. And reality is because no one's really taught me that. Like, no one's really encouraged that. Again, because I was the quiet kid. We see the quiet kids. We're kind of taught that, advocating for yourself is just something that is maybe in some households taught, maybe you see it, maybe you don't, but there's a lot of students that have never been actually taught
Yeah.
that their voice matters, that they and what they say matters. And I see kids all the time who don't get the lesson, like they don't understand it, and they just sit there. And they don't even raise their hand to ask for help. They just sit there and they just fail. And the mom or dad at home might be, hey, what did you ask your teacher for help? No. But how do we actually encourage that? And how do you do it without being that one kid that raises their hand 50 times, shouts out a turn? So there's a fine line, I think, between being overly, aggressive and overly, outrageous with how you behave and how you get attention-seeking behaviors, for example. And then there are the complete opposite when we think kids are very passive and kids that don't seem to care about things. Like there's a very far spectrum of them. What is that sweet spot? What do we want students to be doing? How do we get them to hone in and find that spot where you're assertive, but you're not off-putting?
But I think Dr. Johnson spoke to that when he was saying the differences between low agreeable and high agreeable, and teaching those skills and talking about those in the book. I think it's similar to adults and children. Students in the classroom, I remember when I taught first grade for a year, and we had those students who were very, very confident, and then those students who were a little bit, more timid. And I would have conversations with them privately to say, to some of the students who are more timid, I want to hear what you have to say. Sometimes I'm going to call on you. Is that okay? Are you okay with that? Or sometimes I might use your work as an example. And over time, we help to build the confidence in that way. But sometimes as teachers, we could reinforce, unintentionally, always calling on those most confident kids. So when we're doing that and we're consistently, whoever's shot up their hand first, that's who I'm calling on to move through this lesson, that teaches the other children around them, oh, something might be wrong with me. I'm not able to answer as quickly. Then that spirals into, am I as smart as this person? Maybe not. And it continues to spiral down. And we've actually reinforced some things we don't want to. So I definitely, encourage teachers just to think about, as we're going into the school year, how can we better balance the way that we are responding to students? Because there have been times when I've taken those extra confident kids, given them leadership opportunities, and then sometimes saying, hey, I'm going to choose somebody else because I want to help develop them as well, right? You've done all these great things. I'm going to give you a little break and help develop someone else. So I think it is those intentional conversations, and you can actually do that at any age. When I was kindergarten, I would say, I called on you twice. Let's put our hands down. Now I'm going to call on someone else. It's the same thing as if you're in high school saying on the side, hey, there's some other students I want to hear from. So when you're finished, give me a little signal. But for now, I'm going to call on somebody else. So there's definitely ways to do that in a respectful way, where you're saying to someone, I appreciate your contributions, but I'm also going to hear from other students.
Absolutely. Well,
and that's part of building the relationship. So that, the child, and I think part of that too is how you, it's just like when I talk about, with an administrator, with their teachers, it's the little things you learn about them, the small talk. And I know it's hard sometimes for teachers if they have a lot of students, or, they have 6 different classes with 30 students or something. So, obviously it depends, but especially in the younger grades, if you have them all day, it's just so important to, to have that relationship where you are listening and understanding, and what they like, what they don't, what they're good at, or, those types of things. And that allows you ideas on how to, draw it out of them, basically, which again is what that word means. So, it goes back to that foundation of just relationship and wanting to get the best from them. Every student. And that's the whole point of the book, is that one of the big things I always say is there's no standard student. Every student has talents, abilities, passions, and the potential to be great. And, it's really our job. I know it's their parents' job too, but we're not in their home. We're in the school, and so it's as part of our job too is to help them realize what their strengths are, what their abilities are, and help them maximize that, help them become their best. And every student has it. It's just like when we talk about, I don't think no teacher wants to be a bad teacher. I really don't think any child really wants to be a bad child. And, circumstances. And in the book, I talk, some come from trauma and different things that influence it. And that's a reality, unfortunately, even more probably in today's world. But for the most part, if we can create that environment where they feel safe, where they know that you care and you're on their team, for the most part, for most students, I think that we can really, turn around and help them be their best.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we are running out of time. So we've had a great discussion today. I hear maybe you have a couple of shirts or something.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they want to, I'll hold them up. I'll have to put my microphone down. I'll mute so it doesn't make a loud noise. But I want to show a couple, and then we'll draw a couple of names.
All right. And if you are interested in a shirt or a book, make sure you're commenting in the comments. The only way to be eligible is to be making some comments out there. So and we're going to randomly select. All right. And can you hold that up again? Because I was at a school, like I was telling you the other day, I was at a school and I actually saw somebody wearing a shirt that had that exact phrase on it. And I got to say, I know that guy. It's wild how far that has come and how many schools have that up. You even said it's on some schools' walls.
Are you still muted?
Yeah,
Dr. Johnson?
you're muted.
Okay. Yeah. I'm running my mouth. I said, yeah, I'd love to go into the schools and see that. It makes a pretty good mission statement, I think. Relationships for rigor, patience for program. And then the other shirt is my other quote, the love what you teach, but love who you teach more, which I think is important too. Which is kind of funny because I get feedback. Sometimes people are like, oh, great, I have to love them now too. And I'm like, well, that doesn't mean you're going to like them all the time. I don't think most of my teachers, after they had me, if they had a child they ever named Brad. So I know how that is. But loving them is not always necessarily liking them, but it's what we've been talking about, wanting the best for them. And, that kind of thing. So, yeah, either one of those shirts, just if they want to put in, I guess, a comment or something, and we'll draw a couple of names afterwards.
Absolutely. And again, if you're interested in a book or a shirt, we're going to be giving away some. I'm going to leave the comments open for a little while after the show. We're going to randomly select a few and contact you about your prize. So ending the live, your book is out today. We've been talking about this for a while now. You can actually get it today on Amazon. I'll put the link in the comments. But what is your closing remarks? What is one thing you want people to know, and why should they get your book?
First off, Rachel, thank you for coming on. I love your support. You're amazing. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And, it goes back to just, I really think that quote, I know everybody knows it and it's been said to death, but the relationships before rigor, patience before program, love before lessons. It's just a mindset that we see the students as children first, as human first. And the same thing that we expect from our adults as an administrator, to see their staff as human first. I like the thought somebody shared with me one time, because whether you're the teacher with the students in the classroom or you're the administrator with the teachers and the staff, whatever level, at the end of the day, when you turn off those lights and you walk out of the school, you're just human beings again. And I think that's a powerful way to frame it and to think about it. And when we look at it that way, hopefully we do have a little bit more patience and kindness for each other, and just a little bit more love for other people and for what we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And, thank you for coming on the show and talking about the book as well. Love the experiences as a principal and a kindergarten teacher and the insights. So thank you so much. I want to thank Caroline as well. I hope everyone has a great night. Check out the book, and we'll see you next time on Teacher Goes Live.
All right. Thanks. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.